Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I am a digital marketer in life sciences. And as we get started today, I wanted to just share briefly. I got some great news yesterday. The Feed Spot team sent me a badge here that says that Life Science Success is the top podcast for life sciences, and so they take 25 podcasts and essentially stack them up against each other. My friend Chris Connor's in the number six slot with Life Science Marketing Radio, and I felt blessed that we are in the top slot for life sciences. So thank you to all of you for watching the show. I really appreciate it, and I really thank all the guests as well for all of their time that they spend with me, telling me their stories as well. And so, with that, it's a great transition for me to go to Lyle Small. So he's a seasoned innovator with 35 years of experience in interactive inks and coatings, who is now the founder and CEO of Lahjavida. They're a promising cancer research company developing targeted chemotherapy technologies. So, with that, welcome, Lyle. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Don, and congratulations on your award. That's excellent.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because we're in Colorado, so of course, I was trying to go to a social event last night, and they were hosting it at a brewery of all places, and so I got that, and I was trying to send it to my wife, text it to my wife, along with responding to the company, and in the midst, I had said, I just might have to have another beer to the company that sent me the award instead of my wife, so it was kind of typical me kind of mistake, but it made me kind of chuckle afterwards because I told my wife, and she kind of laughed. But yeah,
That's great.
I had my one beer, enjoyed my time, and then yeah, actually came back home. So it was all good. So
Fantastic.
so Lyle, would you mind tell us a little bit about your journey? It's interesting to me to hear, this thing about interactive inks, but also, I obviously want to spend time, just hearing your story. What is it that led you to, chemistry and life sciences and business overall?
Yeah, these are always weird stories, I suppose. My dad taught chemistry in high school while I was growing up. So that it turns out it had very little to do with my father's occupation. I sort of fell into it a little bit. I went to Cornell to play football and to try to get a good education, and just was thrilled about what I was seeing in all of my science classes and my technical classes, and was bored to tears in my business classes. Started out as a business major. So I'm the only person that I ever met that went from the business school into engineering at Cornell. The flow was out of engineering. People were running from that degree, and I was foolish enough to sign up. So, I in terms of what really drove me, well, a lot of it was necessity. When I think about innovation, for how I got into innovation, my like I said, dad taught high school, 6 kids in the family, mom was stay at home. So if something broke, you fixed it, right? You don't go buy another one. So I figured out how to fix things. So necessity was the mother of invention in that case. And it wasn't until I got my first job in college at an innovation driven company. They were making seamless pressure vessels with composite materials, and they invited me to work with this guy with a master's degree to develop a winding machine that would wind these giant pressure vessels. And I just absolutely was gaga for it. I mean, I found myself thinking about it all the time. And I was thinking, how in the world am I ever going to stay in a business degree when, I could be inventing things? The world's never seen anything like this. This is coming out of our heads every day. We're developing this. So that's when I think innovation really grabbed a hold of me. Just as a general thing. And biology was the class that kind of flipped it for me, where I said, I need to know more about how the world works. And kind of dove into bioengineering at Cornell and added another year to my college life. But it's turned out okay.
Yeah, I remember very well getting ready to sort of tracking to finishing degrees, different degrees, and just going. I can't wait till I'll be done. What as at one point in my PhD journey, my wife and I were having this conversation about there is such a thing as just everybody that's finished all of their coursework all the way up to their dissertation and just hadn't finished their dissertation. So an ABD is all but dissertation. Essentially just saying, hey, look, I started, but I just didn't get that last piece done. And I don't know about tacking on another year. If somebody were to say that to me, I would have just yeah, just said no, I can't do it.
Yeah, it was a tough call, I tell
Yeah.
you. But I mean, never got an advanced degree. So I kind of quasi masters, right? I don't know. I went to school for 5 years instead of four, but that's kind of what makes us unique in terms of biotech. I don't come from a biological background necessarily. Engineering definitely, but spent my life in inks and coatings, which I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll get to.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a little bit. So you spent over 3 decades at the helm of Chromatic Technologies. What inspired you to start on a path of creating interactive inks and coatings?
Yeah, so another, um, this you just follow your nose, right? I've always just kind of, well, that's interesting. I have a short attention span, so I just wander over here for a little while. A friend of mine wanted to make color change T-shirts while I was in college, and I don't know if I was the only guy he knew that would had taken a chemistry class. So he said, "Can you invent an ink that changes colors for me that I can put on a T-shirt?" And I said, "I don't know. Let me give it a try." So I spent a weekend playing around and was able to develop something. I thought it was this amazing thing, of course, that just got really lucky. And some of it was that, but it was a fairly straightforward problem to solve. And he took that technology and built a company around it. And at that point, I was kind of hooked. I sort of spent my all of my spare time playing with color change technologies and trying to do it off campus so that they wouldn't own it. So I'm doing stuff in the basement of the house that I lived in, and playing around, and that sort of curiosity and I got the bug around color change technologies. I thought that I might quit after I graduated. I would work for a cancer research company, but instead I decided to start a company.
Yeah. And so where is can you name some of the places that currently use the color changing that you created?
Well, the most high profile customer of ours is Coors Light. So almost everybody has heard about the color change mountains on the Coors Light can. That technology was really what got our company off the launch pad. Turns out that ink was something I developed personally. So I spent 4 years of my life doing something that I didn't even know was possible. Most folks were telling me it was not possible because of the film thicknesses and just the way cans are made. It just didn't seem possible. But yeah, that technology is one of the big ones. But we've been on Oreos cookies and Frito Lay chips, and been on all kinds of the battery testers for Duracell. Lots of different thermochromic, photochromic, and glow in the dark technologies. We have a sensor that tells you if something's been exposed to freezing temperatures, like a vaccine. That gets stored at the back of the fridge. It might have frozen at some point, and we have an indicator that'll tell you that. We have pressure indicators and things that will tell you about whether something's been exposed to either um, heat seal conditions, like the heat seal that goes around your yogurt container, or that contains a pharmaceutical device, things like that. So lots of different technologies, and you'll see us. I mean, if something changes colors, other than those little matchbox cars, we don't do those, but just about everything else that changes colors, it's likely come from us, or one of those products has used our technologies.
I also wanted to quickly mention that if anybody happens to hear me say CTI, it's Chromatic Technologies Inc. So just in case I happen to abbreviate the company, throughout the rest of the questions, it's that is what the abbreviation is. But Lyle, can you
Yeah.
walk us through kind of a pivotal moment in your career that really shaped the direction of CTI or your approach to innovation?
Well, there's a so those are a couple of different questions. First of all, around the what shaped the direction of the company was the insight that our technology might be used on an aluminum can to tell you
Hmm.
if your beverage is cold enough to drink. That was an idea that a Coke cold is a Coke sold is one of the things that Coca-Cola always says about their product. And we thought, well, we can tell you when your product's cold. People fish through those refrigerators at Walmart to find the cold drinks in there. We could give an indicator that tells you that it's cold. And that insight that we got collectively as a team set us on this path that really changed the business. I mean, not just for Coors Light, but we're on 20 brands around the world, beer brands. We've been on Coca Cola many times, and Sprite, various other Coca Cola products. So that insight definitely helped us. Prior to this, we were putting our stuff on checks, receipts, and coupons.
Mm.
And as you probably are aware, checks, receipts, and coupons haven't done so well in the last 30 years. They've been on a decline, so it's not really a growth business. So we kind of bent over to pick up a penny, and a bullet whizzed over our heads. And in another sense, that technology has enabled much of the innovations that came after it. And I didn't know that was going to happen. It was just one of those really lucky things. There's been many things we've worked on over the years, as anybody that does innovation will tell you. Most things don't work. Most things are worth nothing when you're done. A customer changes their mind, or it doesn't work out the way you thought it would. Innovation is a tough way to make a living. But when you play the odds and you're persistent, then you can get to something that really does resonate with consumers. And that particular technology was one of them.
Yeah, very good. So, in terms of the things that CTI worked on, what do you see as the core mission that drives the company?
Uh, for CTI, our mission is improving lives through um, interactive inks and coatings that alert, protect, and surprise people. That's the tagline for our mission.
Yeah.
So anything that involves the five senses and you can put it into an ink or a coating, then we're interested in it. We want to tell consumers something about the product that they're holding that they care about. You know, this product is cold. It's appropriately cold. Where it's on the store shelf, you can see that it's cold. Or this little vial that I'm holding has been exposed to freezing temperatures. Or that diaper over there has needs to be changed. We have the a printable wetness indicator rather than the hot melt glue that is on the current products today, as another example. So we're really uh, focused on this idea of understanding consumer needs as it relates to temperature, light, pressure, moisture, etc.
So let's talk a little bit about. Well, I know I'm going to get the company name wrong, but let me try. Let me try one more time.
Lahjavida.
Lahjavida. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing there. So, what sort of led you down this path? So, I mean, you described a lot of the things that you guys are working on at CTI, but it's very interesting to me to watch people transition overall. And I feel like innovators, sort of look for problems and where they feel like they can contribute. So, I'm interested in hearing that story as well.
Yeah. Well, I've made my career out of inventing new things, and I'm constantly enthralled by the world and how it works. And I've hired dye chemists my whole life. So I hired a dye chemist as my VP of R&D back in 2009. On his first day of work, he showed me this image of a mouse, and it had a glowing section on its right rear flank. And he said that glowing area is a tumor on this mouse. And that tumor has my dye in it. That's how he described it. He had been working with Georgia State University on a dye that stuck selectively to cancer cells, didn't stick to healthy tissues. And I thought that is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. And then 2 days later, Sunday evening, sitting on my couch watching 60 Minutes of all things, they were doing a show about a guy that had the idea of injecting gold nanoparticles into a tumor and then hitting it with radio waves that pass through healthy tissues just fine, but heat up gold nanoparticles and kill the tumor with gold nanoparticles. And at the end of the show, they said the only thing we need for this is a delivery system. And it was like the skies had opened, right? I had just received this message from the universe that said, well, I just saw a delivery mechanism on Friday afternoon. Jim just showed me a picture of something that sticks to cancer cells. That's what you need. Just stick that thing to the gold and we're good. So the next Monday, I went in. That next day, I went into Jim and I said, "Can you stick this to gold nanoparticles, your dye?" And he said, "Hypothetically, sure." And that was the beginning. That was
Wow.
2000. Filed the patent for that idea in 2010. Got the patent in 2012, and have been through everything you can imagine in terms of failures and obstacles and craziness since that time, to try to get something that would potentially be a treatment for cancer. And now we're at the drug stage. We're using drugs as a payload rather than gold nanoparticles. But gold can still be a really great use case, we think, one day. But right now, it's a focus on chemotherapy.
Very good. Yeah, it takes me back a ways in my career. So I mean, first time out of school, first time into a hospital, working with a researcher. I was working on a drug called photofrin, that essentially would get injected into patients and only absorbed as well into cancer cells. It would photoluminesce, at right around 632 nanometers. So you'd have to,
Mm,
shine a laser with a very specific frequency light into the tumor
yep.
itself. And by doing that, it would cause it to release oxygen. And so the oxygen would kill the cancer cells as well. So
Brilliant.
similar kind of
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know where photofrin is today. I don't think it's widely used or researched at this point, but it was definitely an interesting journey for me. We saw a lot of stage 4 cancer patients, unfortunately, and which was kind of the end of my time wanting to be on that end of clinical research. Just watching a lot of people. There were great people, at the very last stages of their life was sad for me, and so definitely not my not something I wanted to continue to do. But obviously, being on the developing end would have been would have been a little different, little
Right,
little bit
right.
of a different journey too. So
Yeah.
tell me, how does your background in chemistry and manufacturing influence, the things that you're currently looking at, for your team?
Yeah, these skills that you think you'll never use again, right? Um, it is a constant conversation about our discussing the key characteristics of our technology. We have taken this near infrared dye that fluoresces at 808 nanometers, by the way, and uh, attaching it to this specific self-immolating linker that only dissolves in cancer tissue and releasing a chemotherapy payload. There's a constant discussion around um, not just the few compounds that we've already made, but what does the future look like? What's the pipeline? And we are not yet at the CMC stage with our drug. We actually haven't even chosen the lead yet. We're probably going to do that in the next few weeks. But the it is fascinating to me how often my engineering brain has to turn on to think about, okay, how pure are the raw materials going into the synthesis? How accurate is the analytical techniques? We had a problem just a few weeks ago sending a sample to Bangalore. We thought it had degraded. It was on a tarmac in China while the US is bombing Iran. And our samples, this is like our lives are in this package, and it's warming up in Guangzhou or something, right? We got our CRO got this package and tested them and said these things are contaminated. These things are degraded. They got
Mm.
hot. We thought so. They did a whole process around trying to troubleshoot that, and that isn't supposed to be part of my job description. I'm not supposed to be worried about whether we're using UV LCMS or using ELSD LCMS. Like, wait, one company used one technique to analyze the product, and the other used a different one, and they gave very different results. Turns out the samples were fine, but we didn't know that both the company that made it and the company that got it used two different analytical techniques. And I'm like, how many different ways can this go wrong? Because it feels like we're experimenting with all of them. But has been the nature of my job, I suppose, is firefighter and therapist and the rest of it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, the one quote by Elon Musk that I do like, that I think, sort of, comes to play here is he likens being an entrepreneur as, looking into the abyss while chewing glass or something. There's some sort of quote that's close to
Yes.
that. And
I
and
Yeah.
I sort of, I mean, there are times like these where I just, yeah, I mean, you're sort of like, okay, so tomorrow are we going to have to shut the doors? Or are we going to find our way around this problem? What exactly is going to happen here?
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah,
is what
there
played
there
through your
it's
mind.
a it is a it's a reasonable analogy. I would say that I wouldn't call it quite so
Bleak,
excruciating.
yeah.
It's only occasionally excruciating, but yeah, probably on a daily basis you're wondering, are we going to be able to continue for one reason or the other, because there are hundreds of reasons that you stop. But until it becomes impossible to move ahead, you keep moving forward. And so far, the progress has exceeded my wildest expectations.
I love that. And I think you described this a little bit, in some of your in some of your earlier explanations. So CTI has more than 20 patents. It's launched 35 unique technologies. What's your approach to identifying new opportunities and turning them into tangible innovation?
This particular thing is, I believe, my superpower. So I do lots of things poorly. But I think that what you're touching on here is something that I have tried really hard to figure out over the years, And I think that we as a business have gotten pretty good at it. Of course, you're going to lose most of the time. But if you can go from 2% success to 5% success, that's the difference between having a wildly successful business and a bankrupt business, right?
Mm,
Playing those odds. And a new technology can die anywhere along the path, but trying to first understand what you do really well, and then trying to then understand how those core competencies fit with what consumers really need, right? Not what they want. You know, Henry Ford said, if I asked people what they wanted, they'd have told me faster horses,
right.
right? You've heard that quote.
Hmm.
So you don't give people what they're asking for. You're trying to figure out what problem they're trying to solve and how your technology can address those problems and challenges that they're trying to fix in their lives. And then being honest with yourself once you do find a potential technology that you think you could theoretically invent. Do you have the budget for it? Do you have the people for it? Do you have a decent idea about what it's going to look like when you're finished? And then stage gate this thing in a disciplined way and be brave enough to shoot it in the head at any moment. Like, this thing no longer meets the standard. It's gone. It's done. And there's nothing more excruciating for a nerd like me than killing a project.
Yeah.
I don't want to kill anything. But being able to do it, to say, this no longer deserves to be on our list, it's done, and have
Hmm.
everybody argue against that. No, you know how long we've been working on this, Lyle? Yeah, I'm well aware. I'm writing the checks. And we're going to end this now,
Mm,
because it's no longer viable. So, um, there's a lot of other things that go into this, what they call failure mode analysis, right? Failure mode and FMEA. Yeah,
mhm.
so you're trying to evaluate ways that things can fail. That going through that process is crucial. Having a process for defining problems and then working the problem in a logical way.
Yeah, if memory
And
serves me right, it's failure mode and effects analysis.
effects analysis. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
You want to
but
figure out the mode
all,
and then what the effect of the failure is, right?
yeah, all of us use FMEA, and then nobody sort of spells it out. So, but
Yeah, right.
yeah.
And
So,
very few people adhere to it, right?
oh
We
yes,
give it a
for sure.
fancy name. You fill out the chart. You got all of the numbers filled in. Like, this is a 27% chance of failure,
Mm,
and then this thing gets set aside, and
yeah,
having the discipline to go back to this thing and be go through that list and say, we have to address this risk or it could really hurt us. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
also
hard.
true. So let's talk a little bit about your role as looking at and building teams. So how does your background in chemistry and manufacturing influence your current leadership roles? And then what is it that you look for in the team?
Well, I will say that my background in chemistry and engineering did very little to help me in my team building skills. Like, I started a business kind of because I was unemployable, as the nerd that I was to some extent. I was kind of keep this guy away from regular people. That's not really, that doesn't lend itself well to team building. But that's one of the first things you have to do when you start a company, is figure out who's going to be on your little bus, and what are they going to do with their time, and how do you keep them motivated. um, one of the things that I think we've done exceptionally well, I've made every hiring mistake you can imagine in the last 30 years, just not really understanding either the needs that we were trying to fill or the talents of the people we were trying to attract. But one thing we've done really well, I think, is identify those key individuals, especially on the technology side, bringing on people like me, nerds like me, that uh, looked at the world differently
Mhm.
and might even be, not necessarily seen as a big asset in a company, but I see those types of people as people that we need to elevate. Elevate the technologists. These people are the ones that are really making things happen. As a nerd, having an appreciation for the innovation process, how hard it is, you have to have somebody that's obsessed with innovation. And these people are not what you would call your most socially adept types, as I alluded to earlier, right? These people often don't get along with the rest of us normal people, quote unquote, but they're the ones that are actually doing the innovating and elevating those people and making them a central part of the innovation process. A lot of times we treat them like mushrooms, as they say. We're going to tell you what to do. We'll give you the instructions and keep you away from the customer, because heaven forbid you have a discussion with the person that's asking us to invent something for them. It was always my opinion that you get the innovator on the phone with the customer as soon as possible and let them ask the hard questions.
Mm.
So in terms of team building, understanding people's individual motivations, because we talked about the nerds, but then you have the people that are selling the product, and the folks that are keeping track of the money, and the people that have to make the product, and getting those people in a room and getting them to disagree without being disagreeable, have healthy conflict. That's hard to do. Some people are good at conflict. Most people aren't very good at
Mhm.
conflict. They argue poorly. They argue like it's personal. They don't use sound reasoning. They want to just bully people into their way of thinking. And figuring out those folks before you give them too much power, like people like that can't really succeed in an executive team. And it's really hard to teach somebody to set their ego aside in a tough discussion. So these are the kinds of things I think about when I think about creating a leadership team. Is I have four things that are must-haves for me with people. I say it over and over again: humility, curiosity, courage, and kindness.
Mm.
Right? You have to have all of those. Um, and if you miss one of them, you cannot be on our team. I won't work with somebody who doesn't have some self awareness, who is curious enough to ask questions about from the other person, seek first to understand and then to be understood. And no jerks, right? You can't have people on your team that are just jerks.
Yeah.
And courage means that you stand up and you identify when you got a jerk on the team, or you are courageous enough to admit when you're wrong, when the thing that you've been advocating turns out to be exactly the opposite of what we should have been doing, and say, "Hey, I messed up. I'm going to take accountability," without somebody having to point it out for you. So I guess that's broad strokes, in 5 minutes or less, how I've thought about teams for the last 30 years.
I think you've hit a lot of really good points. I mean, in your initial opening, I mean, when you said, your understanding of how to build a team, wasn't really there. The first thing that came to mind for me was, given your football experience, and I've used this analogy before, that, when and I'm not a huge sports fan. And I mean, I sort of tell people like, look, I don't understand everything that happens in football. I certainly understand, when people are scoring goals and things like that, but I don't understand, kind of the technicalities. But whenever I look at a football field, I can see kind of a corporate organization. I could see, the salespeople in the organization. I could see the marketers. I could see the people that, essentially are all on the offensive side. And then you also sort of see the scientists and the developers and the people that are creating kind of the base technology on the defensive side of the organization, and just more or less building that aspect of the company as well. But I also think that you've hit on some really key points as well, because one of the things that I've seen a larger shift in many organizations, and one of the organizations that I work with today is definitely one of these where they really have figured out how to make sure that the bullies and the people that are like corporate antagonists overall, really aren't a part of their organization. They found a way to sort of say, look, if that is your trait, go somewhere else, please, because we don't want you. And I've been in organizations. I mean, my time at GE, I certainly ran into several people that they were promoted entirely because of the fact that they were corporate bullies, and they would gladly call you to a meeting with 30 people, and in front of 30 people essentially call up somebody that they didn't particularly like, and then have that person sort of be undressed, is what the way I sort of liken it, in front of
Wow.
everybody. So the minute that I moved into consulting, the one thing I went to my attorney and said, look, if this happens, I want the ability to walk out, and I want the ability for the company that I'm working with to be zero to come after me for anything other than paying my final bill for the day and me moving on, because I don't want to work with them. And it was
Right.
funny, the first couple times that I ran into it, people were a little shocked that, hey, look, he's done for the day. And by the way, he's not coming back because our CEO had his, fourth or fifth blow up of the day. And this one happened to be in the room with the consultant. And by the way, he's not working with them. And so I was,
Right.
more than happy to pack up my stuff and leave. And the CEO again tried to uses common tactics of, hey, you can't do this. Oh, I can, and it's in my contract.
But
So
can I? As a matter of fact, I can.
I
Yes.
can, yeah. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's an important thing, like having a little self awareness, having
Yeah.
a lot of empathy, kindness, and approaching the world with a lot of curiosity. I think could carry us a lot further
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, you have to gird yourself a little bit and get a stiff spine and say, I'm going to do something that's uncomfortable today.
Mm,
I'm going to go into my boss and have an uncomfortable conversation and say, you can't treat me like that. As one example, you can't. You have to be courageous. You have to take risks. When we're talking about leadership, I was thinking about this when you had asked me this question earlier about leadership, and um, it is true that you can have people that aren't going to win any congeniality contests, right? Steve Jobs is one well-known jerk.
mhm,
George Patton, a well-known jerk, and people would walk through fire for these guys. uh, you know, some people will walk through fire for people like that, right? So leadership is really, it's true that leadership is about more than being just a nice person. You have to be competent
mhm,
and have this combination of self-awareness, but also being willing to be bold and knowing when to be one or the other. And sometimes you're going to have to be both at the same time.
mhm,
Sometimes the most bold thing you can do is the humble thing. I mean, for instance, I turned my company over to somebody else after 32 years and said, I'm going to let you run the thing. Scared me to death. But that person, in my view, was better equipped to run the company than me. and it would allow me to focus myself on this thing that I have a total passion for. So I had to be humble and I had to be bold. And if the people below you, the people that work for you, don't want to know that you're just a nice person because their lives are tied up in this endeavor, they want to also know that you're competent and that you're going to work hard and that you have their backs when things are hard. You need all of those things because the enterprise has to succeed. You have to know what you're doing, not just be a nice person.
Right.
Um, we got to win in the end.
That's right. So let's talk a little bit about where you currently are. I mean, you mentioned the fact that you're not at CMC yet, but you guys are currently in the fundraising stage. My understanding is you're at the seed stage as well. If that's correct.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what stage are we at? We've been at it for 15 years, as I mentioned. So, stage is a difficult term. Use CTI funds, CTI shareholder funds to basically underwrite the endeavor. We're about $3.5 million of our collective money into it. So, in a certain sense, you'd call that pre-seed, I suppose. And now we're trying to raise $8 million to get to human trials in 2027. Raised $1.5 million of that. But the stage, we've got 3 different animal studies just with chemotherapy drugs, 2 different chemotherapy drugs, and 2 different dye molecules.
Hmm.
And we've shown really good tumor selectivity with all 4 compounds, really good efficacy with 2 of those 4. We only tested 2 of the 4, but got good efficacy in tumor shrinking, and almost no toxicity. And seen these signals at very high dosages, by the way. So we've seen these signals over a long period of time. And it's really what convinced me to give up the helm of CEO at the other company and start full time at Lahjavida, because I believed, based on what smart people were telling me, that we have enough here to go out and raise money. This is a signal that could be transformative for cancer care.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to cover because the one thing that I hear from guests routinely is that they get contacted after the show. So, if any investors are currently listening or watching, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to Lyle. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can reach us through our website, lahjavida.com. It's LAHJAVIDA.com. I've made a very difficult name for the company, so only half the people that hear that are going to be able to get to the website. Lahjavida.com. It means a gift of life in 2 different languages. That's the best way to get in touch with me. You can also call me on my cell phone, 719-661-5632. That's my personal cell phone. And if you want to talk about Lahjavida and how to make it better, I'm happy to chat.
Very good. Last couple questions here. So, what inspires you, Lyle?
What the thing that inspires me broadly is the idea of human flourishing. It's the reason that I got into that I started the company, that I changed my major to engineering. I just love the potential of bringing new technology into the human experience and making people's lives a little bit better through innovation, and doing it in an environment where people get to make decisions about that, a free market where they get to make buying decisions. I just love capitalism, and I love innovation and what it can do for people. So that broadly inspires me. The little project we've got going right now inspires me because I think that it has the potential to transform chemotherapy and maybe even small molecule targeted therapy. We could be
Hmm.
talking about 2/3 of the cancer patients in the world whose condition could be made better through this technology because it's just a delivery system. It's like an antibody, only without all of the downsides of antibodies. It's a simple near infrared dye that sticks to over 30 different types of cancer. And when I think about what that could do for cancer patients, I mean, how can you not be inspired by the potential of that?
So important. What
Yeah.
concerns you?
Well, it's not just because it's my primary job, but what worries me most within Lahjavida is cash, right? That we're not going to have the cash to answer the fundamental questions that are going to lead to an IND filing. I am, that's every CEO's biggest concern. Companies live on data and cash, and one feeds the other. And my job every day is to beg for money and to figure out better ways to beg for money. Those are my two primary activities. So yeah, cash is a big deal. I don't worry as much about whether or not it's going to work. Number one, because I've seen the data so far, and I think that it has a great shot. But it's not something that I can influence on a daily basis. So I don't get really wound up about whether it's going to pass every test that it's going to have to undertake. I don't get too worried about that, but I am worried about having the fuel to make it happen, of course. And then there's all the stuff in the world that we all worry about that makes the environment less hospitable, shall we say? And biotech is taking it on the chin a little bit lately, and we're seeing the effects of that. But we're also getting a lot of attention from smart people too, because the data's powerful.
So important. And last question: what excites you?
The prospect of making progress, I think, is the most exciting thing. I mean, the thing that makes that the hardest thing for me is not making progress or being. I'm daily confused about which direction to go. But when you make a little bit of progress, that is like a drug for me. It's like this adrenaline shot. I actually got someplace today. I made a little bit of progress toward the ultimate goal. Somebody agreed to a call, or we actually figured out that our samples are good, or we got a little bit of data that we weren't expecting that good news yet. So yeah, the exciting thing is the idea that a, a little company could create a platform that does a lot for the world.
Yeah. And I wish you well, and I wish the team at Lahjavida well as well. And Lyle, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success Podcast again. For anybody that that is an investor, this company, obviously, demonstrates an awful lot of promise for a lot of people that are currently suffering with cancer. So I wish you well, and look forward to hearing more in the future.
Thanks, Don. I really love what you do. This has been a real fun conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.